he went through the GI Bill. So when he graduated from college, his father gave him the 5,000.
Oh.
He said it was a real good start.
Oh.
Okay, you guys ready? All right, we're going to start this again.
Apologize, sir.
All right.
No problem.
All right.
Okay, now, do we have enough lights on? Because it just seems like there's shadows there. There's not
Oh,
shadows.
we're standing, she's standing in the...
Oh, okay, I was going to say there's a shadow on the face.
It's perfect.
Okay. All right. Would you give us your name, please?
My name is Wendell D. Gugler. It's spelled G-U-G-L-E-R.
And where do you live now?
I live in Abilene, Kansas. I've lived there all my life, except the time in school and Army.
And what's your unit?
Company E of the 85th.
Is there anything anything special that you have in mind that you would like to talk about?
Nothing really special, no.
Well, then let's start with, how did you get into the 10th?
Well, during my senior year in high school, a friend who was a year older than I was attending Harvard, and he came home from Harvard and was telling me about they were in New England asking for volunteers for the ski troops, and that sounded great to me. And so I asked him what we had to do, and he said we had to contact the National Ski Patrol Association in New York and fill out an application and get 3 letters of recommendation. So I did that, and then they notified me that when I went to the reception center being drafted, that they would send me out to Camp Hale. And so I was drafted. Well, at the draft reception center, they tried to put me in the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and everything else. And I said, no, I'm going to the ski troops. And so they finally figured it out, not at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, what to do with me. And they after 2 weeks, they sent me out on the train to Pando at Camp Hale. And I was immediately assigned to Company E, the 85th Mountain Infantry, and I took basic training right while I was at the E Company, and really appreciated that, because we had, and included in the basic was some mountain training too.
Now, why did you think you wanted to go to the ski troops? Were you a skier?
No, I was not. I had never skied. I had spent many summers in Colorado, but I never had skied.
So you wanted to go to Colorado?
Yes.
When you got out to Camp Hale, what was your first impression when you got off the train in Pando Valley?
Well, looking at it from the train first, it was quite an installation, and I was really impressed with it. Surrounded by the mountains.
And do you remember the sequence of events of what happened when you got off that train? Can you remember back to what actually happened, what you would have done, say, for the first day?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, you did. Well, you ended up in 85E. Do you remember who your company commander, or your sergeants or anything like that?
I remember my first sergeant. His name was John Lopko, and he was the cadre that had been sent there from Hawaiian Islands. He was originally from New York. And another one of the cadre was a man named Sergeant Lip, and he was the platoon sergeant of the 3rd Platoon, and I was assigned to the 1st Squad of the 3rd Platoon. And I was in that same company, or same squad for a year that we were at Camp Hale. And then when when the division was shipped to Camp Swift, Texas, I was transferred to the company headquarters of E Company. So
you spent a year at Camp Hale?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever get back to Kansas during that time?
Yes, I did. One time was an emergency furlough that I had because my younger sister had passed away. And so And it was right at the beginning of D series, which in a way was a good time to leave, but on the other hand, I missed part of D series, which I would have enjoyed too.
How would you have gotten home?
By train.
Oh, so you took a train then back to Kansas?
Yes.
Back to Kansas. Well, what was one thing about the D, you came back then to the D series?
Yes.
And so how long did that D series take?
I think it was 3 weeks, as I recall.
And what was the purpose of that D series?
Well, it was to really get some effective training in the field.
And do you think you got an effective training? I mean, did you think that it was worthwhile?
Yes, it taught us to how to, as we have had training before, but it really impressed on us the being able to live in the field, and of course we had wonderful equipment. If we'd be traversing the slope on our skis, and they would assign us certain locations in the forested area, and of course the snow was most places 3 or 4 feet at least deep, and if we were in maneuvers and didn't have time to take pine boughs to put down first, but to have our sleeping bags on, why we've just unrolled it, take a sleeping bag out of our rucksacks and unroll it and crawl in, and in the morning the body heat we'd be under the snow, and particularly if it snowed that night, we'd be covered with the snow.
What did you eat during the D series, or how did you eat?
We had sea rations. They also had some kitchen set up too, but primarily it was sea rations.
For 3 weeks, they ate sea rations.
Yes.
When you look back at this experience of the D series, what's one good thing that you could say about it? One positive thing that would have influenced you, or that would have been worthwhile about it?
Well, it impressed on us what we might be facing when we did finally go into combat, I think.
And you felt that you could, after the D series, you could face anything?
Well, for the most part, yes.
But when you look back on it, what's one really bad thing that was about the D series? A negative thing, or something that didn't need to be or wasn't worthwhile? Anything?
Nothing really, no.
So it was a positive influence on your life.
Yes, it was.
So when you spent all this time in Colorado, it was almost a year. And you went home once because of a family crisis. Did you ever leave Camp Hale any other time?
Oh yes, went to Denver quite often on the weekend.
How often would you go to Denver? Say in a month, how often would you go?
3 times.
So 3 weekends you'd have off.
Yes.
And how would you get off? I mean, how did they arrange that?
Well, we'd have to have our own transportation, of course, and some of the fellows in the company had cars, and they'd take a carload over Loveland Pass, and we'd stay at, I was trying to think of the name of the hotel. It was the one across the street from the Brown Palace. Some of the guys stayed at the Brown Palace, but that was a little rich. And we'd have a great time. I also had a friend, George Schmid, who grew up in Denver. And in fact, I visited his home there, and in fact, I stayed overnight with his family, and he arranged a double date for us, and we had a great time.
And do you remember who the girl was, what her name was or anything?
I'm sorry, I can't know.
You don't remember. And what did you do on your double date?
Well, I remember one thing. We went to a park and had a great time, just frolicking around.
What does frolicking around mean? Did you play games or?
Oh, some, yes.
Yeah. On other times that you were in Denver, what would you do in Denver? You would stay at the hotel. If you stayed at the hotel, what would you do?
Well, drink a little beer and have some camaraderie. And of course, we wore our mountain jackets and ski hats, and so we felt we were quite special anyway. And I had a uniform that wasn't unusual.
And how about the females or the women around? Were they attracted? Did you have any trouble, meeting women or having, going out with, dates and things like that?
I really didn't date any, no, but just played around with friends, and in addition to George Schmidt. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
George, by the way, George didn't make it back from Italy.
He didn't? What happened to George?
No, he was killed over there.
And where was George killed?
It was near, can't think of the town, but it was in the Apennines.
Do you remember the date?
No, I can't remember exactly.
Did you ever speak to George's family afterwards?
No, I did not.
No. So we're going to go back to Camp Hale. So when Camp Hale was coming to a close and you found out that you were going to Camp Swift, what was your reaction to that?
Well, we all felt that there was a crazy army move to send us to a spot like that after we'd been in the mountains in the cold, and send us down there in the heat because we knew it was going to be hot.
Well, some of the men left. Some of the men signed up for the paratroopers. Did you ever think of leaving the 10th?
No, I did not.
No, that didn't bother you. So what was tell us about Camp Swift.
Well,
the good stuff, the bad stuff.
Well, it was extremely hot, of course, and I remember one 14-mile march that they forced us to take, an extremely hot day, and I was one of only 3 or 4, I think, out of the company that didn't pass out and made it through. Of course, I was used to heat from Kansas, of course, too, but it was really a severe test.
And did you stay with the same platoon?
No, at that time I was in the company headquarters at Company E.
And they still made you march?
Oh yes, yeah.
But what did you do in headquarters?
I was a radio operator, and I worked in the office some too. Mm-hmm.
So when they would go on marches, why would you have to go? Weren't you more administrative or?
Well, we all had to do it.
You did?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when did you find out that you were leaving Camp Swift?
Well, it was in December of '44, and we received orders to go back to board the train. We didn't really, I recall, we didn't know exactly where we were going.
So did you have leave before that happened?
No. Mm-hmm.
So you just all got on the train. And when did you find out you were going overseas?
Well, when we got to Camp Patrick Henry, Virginia. Mm-hmm.
And so they boarded you on these boats, on this boat.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And when did you find on the boat that you were going to Italy?
I can't remember.
But what was your reaction about going to Italy?
Well, I thought it would be very interesting, and it could be difficult too, but.
And so was that sort of an excitement about finally getting into the war, or apprehension, or what was it?
Well, I would say both.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But you're still with the same group. You're still with your buddies.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So tell us what life was like on this ship. You know, how did they manage sleeping and quarters and eating, and how did that function?
Well, the bunks were, as I recall, about 5 deep, and it was quite a climb to get to the top one, which I was in one of them. The food was all right. We had very close quarters, of course, and we had to use our mess kits and canteens, as I recall. And one lucky thing for me was that I did not get seasick. I've never been seasick. But there was one fellow in our company, I thought he was going to die because we were on the ship for 11 days and he didn't ever eat anything and he just looked terrible.
I understand there was a lot of sickness.
Yes.
And that was what someone said, that was one of the hardest things to take, was just all the sickness. How much time would you get to sleep?
How much time did we sleep?
Yeah, did you sleep? How did they handle sleeping?
Well, of course, there's no guard duty to do, so we all just slept the full night.
So it was, and what did you do to keep yourself entertained? Or did they have you doing work?
Not much work. There was always a big poker game going on, and you could stand around and watch that. I didn't play the poker, but and of course we just enjoyed the sea too. One thing, the ship we were on, of course, was a large ship, and it didn't have to have accompanying vessels, and so it was protected itself by zigzagging across the sea, and we were impressed with Gibraltar when we went through. I remember that, and then we landed at Naples, and immediately were put into LCIs to go up to Pisa along the east coast of Italy.
What's an LCI?
It was a landing craft, a personnel. They used it for landing craft, but it was a small ship.
So it was a ship that you were in that they took you up?
Yes.
And so when you headed up there from Naples up to, where was it, Longhorn or Pisa? Where was it that you went?
Well, Livorno, I guess, was, and that's where we got off. And then we immediately went over to a staging area near Pisa.
And so who were some of your buddies? What's the names of some of your buddies that were with you at the time? That would have been your group.
Well, Joe Coiro was always one of my best friends. He was from Harlem, New York, and he was one of those that came from Camp Chaffee, Arkansas. And he's another one that was killed over there. And Joe Capchandi was one, the George DeSalvio, George Rosenfield, who is here this afternoon. And I guess those were the main ones. I had a lot of friends, of course, and having been with them for over a year at that time.
So those were your buddies?
Yes.
Those were your brothers?
Right.
So you get up there to Pisa, so what happens from that point on? Didn't you get to Pisa at the beginning of January, if I recall?
The first part of January.
Right.
And then they transported us to a town that I can't think of the name of. I can picture it in my mind just plainly. And we were billeted in the homes of the Italians, and we were there for quite some time, a week or 2 or 3 weeks anyway, and this was before any action was taken. We were not involved in any patrols, but I understand that some of the units did do some patrolling of the front, but
and so how did you spend your days then? Did you have to do training, or?
Yes.
And what would that have consisted of?
Well, primarily just marching and keeping in shape. Keep.
And I guess you had no leave during this time.
No.
There's no leave, so because I guess they were preparing for you to get ready for the assault on Belvedere.
Yes.
So can you tell us something about that? How how that came about, which would have been February the
February 19th.
19th. So when would you have moved into place for that to go up Belvedere?
The 18th. It's the day before. Yes.
So you came from the town where you were. How did you get over to Belvedere?
By truck and then walking.
Then walking.
Yes.
So when you get, because if I recall, the 18th was when the 86th went up River Ridge, and what did the 85th do?
We were in reserve, at least my battalion was, and we were not in the frontal assault up Belvedere, but that afternoon, late afternoon, we went over Belvedere then, and over on a ridge beyond towards Della Traccia. And we were assigned a location to, we were expecting counterattack, and we were assigned a location on the front of the ridge in a forested area, and told to dig in, and of course it was difficult to dig in, but we did the best we could. The Germans did counterattack during the night, and before the counterattack, though, they did a lot of shelling, and of course, being in an area like that, we suffered a number of casualties because there were the artillery shells would burst in the trees and then come down, so you couldn't have a deep enough foxhole, really.
And so the casualties that you had were due to the trees?
To the yes, for the most part, for the artillery shells bursting in the trees and the fragments coming down.
So it's the shrapnel that if you weren't deep enough in your foxhole.
Yes, well, and the foxholes weren't deep enough.
And is that when your friend that you said, I forget what you said his name was, the first man that you mentioned that was killed over there? Would he have been?
I think maybe George was killed that first night.
In
yes.
The shrapnel.
Yes.
By the shrapnel. Well, what would happen to a person who would have been injured? What would they have done with him? Did the medics take care? Could you just? Do you remember how someone that got wounded?
Well, the medics would come, and of course, if they were still alive, they would do the best they could to evacuate them. Later on, in that location, they did put in a tram which was used to bring up supplies and also take the wounded down. But for that first night, there wasn't any tram there, and they would just have to put them in a certain location and wait until they could transport them out.
Did you ever feel like you were going to die?
No, not really. I was just hoping that I wouldn't.
So you never really felt there was a chance when that you didn't think you were going to make it?
Well, no, I guess not. No.
So
I'm just hoping that I'd make it through.
Yeah, like I said, it's the optimism of being 18, 19 years old. That you don't think of those things. So you went through this battle, which would have been around in February. Where did your company go from there?
Well, the next day we were pulled out of that location and sent over to Della Traccia, the mountain next to it. And we did get some men up to the back side of it. The Germans were on the other side, and they were still shelling a lot. And that's another place that we took quite a few casualties. And in fact, I was standing next to our company commander, and he was killed by a sniper.
Who was your company commander?
There again, I can't remember his name. He hadn't been with us very long.
So he was a replacement? Or?
Yes. And another one of our officers, I won't give his name, I remember it, but I won't give it. He just got so shook up that he just took off to the rear, and we never did see him again.
And so who would have been commanding you when your company commander who had only been with you a short time?
Yes.
Would he have been with you since Belvedere?
Yes, he was before that, but I mean...
But why would he be new? What happened to the company commander that you had from Camp Swift?
I can't remember.
You don't remember?
No.
So you had a new company commander and he also was killed?
Yes.
By sniper.
Yes.
Do you remember how that happened? Or?
We just a natural thing, but that's what the German snipers were accomplished at. Was picking out the commanding officers, whether it be an officer or a non-com, and we lost several of our platoon sergeants as well. Now, there was Sergeant Lip that I mentioned earlier. He made it through. He was he's the only one of our platoon sergeants that did make it through.
So how many? Because I don't understand how many would you have had of platoon sergeants? With their
three? There were 3 platoons. No, so, four platoons. I
so 3 of them were killed.
Yes.
And when you were up there on top, at what point did you feel that you had the upper hand on the Germans? Because it seems that you were under attack. At what point were you attacking the Germans?
Well, it was only when we were able to get up to on Tarracha that we had, but then of course they counterattacked again, and so it was just, and there the one weapon that they had that really was killed a lot of our people was the German 88, and it had such a flat trajectory and such velocity that you couldn't hear it coming before it struck. And the other artillery and mortars and so on, you could hear them coming and take cover, but with those 88s you couldn't.
So if you lost your company commander, who would have been commanding the company, your company?
One of the other lieutenants.
Do you remember who that was?
No, I can't remember their names, no.
Well, what kind of leadership did you have then? Did you have good leadership? Did you?
Well, we always had our platoon sergeants until they were killed, but they were replaced also, and then squad sergeants and corporals, and so we always, and of course we'd been together for a year and a half, and so we all knew each other, but then later on we did get replacements in, and in many instances they didn't know what to do, and after you've been in combat a while, you know when you have to take cover and when you have to dig a foxhole and so forth, but and some of these replacements didn't know, and we lost a lot of them just because they didn't, for one thing, they didn't have any friends to start with, and they were not as like our comradeship, and so they didn't know what to do. So
I can imagine, because they didn't have that training. And somebody comes in, you don't have the respect for them.
Right.
But you had I would imagine, the respect for one another.
Yes.
So it was.
And some of the replacements weren't in as good a physical condition as we were either. That's one thing that the Germans were surprised that we could run in the Abilene Mountains. They had never seen troops could do that. And
it's because you were used to being in the mountains, and
trained in Colorado.
Yeah.
in the altitudes that we were, which were in excess of where the Apennines were only 8,000 or 9,000 feet, and we were up in 12 and 13 in Colorado.
So what was the worst part of being of the battles in Italy? What was your worst, I don't know if I want to say battle or fight, I don't know what you call it, but the worst time where you, or was there a couple of them?
Well, there were several, yes, because we had to go through minefields later on, and the Germans had lots of minefields and with their artillery and so forth, and those were the toughest things.
You know, you hear many times that men have reoccurring nightmares later on, or reoccurring things that came back to them. Did you ever have that from any of your time there in Italy?
Not too much, no.
So that was good. So you went all through, do you remember when you got to the Po?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us something about that? Because you came out of the mountains, it would have been the 18th, 19th, 20th of April when you came out of the mountains and crossed Highway 9 and headed toward the Po River. Do you remember that final part? What they call that, the final siege out of the mountains?
Yes. It was a lot of running and walking, and the Germans were surrendering somewhat then, but not as much after we got over the Po and up towards the Italian Alps. It was where the German troops really surrendered, but we did get some surrendered before then. And one problem we had was that we had some rations, but we didn't have any supply coming because we were moving so fast, and in some instances we used German hardtack, Knackebrot.
What is that?
Well, it was just a hard biscuit, but it was very good, and it tasted good to us anyway, and it kept us going. So
what did you do with that, or how did you eat that?
we just bite it off. It was in chunks, in flat pieces, and you just bite it and chew it.
And where did you get that? From the prisoners?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And we found it in some of their where they had been bivouacked and so forth. Mm-hmm.
And what did you do with all these prisoners that turned themselves in?
Well, there were other troops there to take care of them. We didn't have to work with them.
So you just continued on to
We
the
just
Po?
sent them on back, yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
you continued on to the Po. And did you walk all the way to the Po?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because you heard some of them that they got rides and stuff, but you walked. You marched all the way to the Po.
Right.
So what did you do when you got to the Po?
Well, we had camped there, and then when they arranged for boats to take us over, we got in the small boats, and they took us over at night and crossed and camped on the other side until we could reorganize, and then went on.
And now, once again, back to your leadership, because now you have new platoon leaders. Is that what you said they were?
Yes.
You
Mm-hmm.
had the one man, and then they had assigned 3 other ones.
Well, in the meantime, before we got out into the Po, we had new officers assigned.
And do you remember them?
Pardon?
Do you remember their names?
No, I don't. Mm.
It sounded like you guys didn't need officers. That you functioned on your own.
No, we did need officers, all right, right.
That you functioned on your own. So they
But the captain that was assigned to us was an old Army guy, and he was, I just can't remember his name, but he was very competent, and we got along fine with him.
So he was one you didn't mind.
Right.
So now you're on the other side of the Po, and from what I understand, you went from there up to the Lake District.
Yes.
Up
Mm-hmm.
to Lake Garda?
Yes, right.
Because you didn't have any kind of problems from there till Lake Garda, did you?
No, we did not. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's... And how did you get up there to Lake Garda? You didn't walk again, did you?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You did?
We did. There was some transport, but very little. And,
So that's a good jaunt.
yeah.
So you got up to Lake Garda, and so can you remember what happened up there?
Well, we didn't have any combat there, but some of the 86th did. at one of the tunnels, and then of course they lost people with a boat turning over.
Yeah, the duck.
Yeah, the duck, yes. But we weren't involved in that. We just set up camp in one of the small villages on the east bank of Garda, and that's where we were when the Germans surrendered.
Mm-hmm. And did you go on? Did you stay with the 10th from that point?
Yes, they sent our unit, all our battalion, over to Udine, and we were Army of Occupation over there to prevent the Yugoslavs from coming in and taking over that territory.
So basically, what did you do over there?
Mainly just camp. We were just there.
Just your presence.
Yes.
So how did you keep yourself entertained over there? Did you get leave at all?
Yes. Some of the fellows got leave to Venice, and some even down to Rome, I believe, from there. I went on leave on a short trip up to Austria to the Franz Josef Glacier, and really enjoyed that up in the mountains of Austria.
And what did you do there?
Just toured.
Just toured?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And what was the countryside like then? Because this is after a war.
Well, the villages, there hadn't been any fighting there, and so the villagers were just like they always had been. They put us up in some of the hotels there, and but it was that glacier was really outstanding. I remember that.
So when did you head back to the United States?
It was in July of 45, and they told us right then that they were transferring the division back to the United States. Now, in the meantime, though, while we were in Udine, some of the men who had been in the service a long time, for instance, some of our cadre, they were allowed to go back to the United States at that time, and but those of us who had been only about well, it was almost 2 years then, but they kept us in the unit and they put us on a train, and first stopped in Florence, and then reorganized and went on a train further down to Naples, and we boarded a ship there and sailed back to New York City, and then they allowed us to have leave right away, and I walked in. I'll never forget this. I walked in at my parents' home in Abilene, Kansas, as President Truman was announcing that the war with Japan was over. So we didn't have to go on the second wave attacking Japan as they had told us we were going to have to do.
On the ship home, what was the atmosphere like? What was the attitude like? I mean, I know you were going to be going to Japan, but it was warm, it was sunny. What did you guys do?
It was yes, it was very nice weather, and there again, a big poker game going on, and just having a good time, anticipating getting home.
And what was running through? Can you remember any thoughts that you had or any feelings that you had? Anything you were looking forward to? Anything you were anticipating? Anything you were apprehensive about?
No, neither of those.
No? Mm-hmm. There wasn't any. And how did you feel? How did the men in your company feel about those that weren't coming back with you? Was there any ever discussion on that, or did that something you just didn't?
You mean the ones that were killed?
Yeah.
Yes, well, we were certainly sorry for them and their families, and we also lost a lot of men who were wounded and shipped back separately. So we hadn't, we didn't know what had happened to them, a lot of them. We knew they were wounded, but we didn't know how and where they were or anything. So,
What was your first reunion that you went to after the war?
it was 1982 at Aspen. No, not Aspen, at Vale.
And did you see any of your friends there that you thought that you had lost?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So who was there that you were surprised to see?
Oh, I can't recall names right now.
Because that's what I heard, that when people came back, people that they thought they had lost.
Yes,
were there.
There were a number of them, yes.
So what was your feeling going to this first reunion? Before you got there, did you have any apprehension about going to the reunion?
No apprehension. I was just looking forward to seeing friends again.
And how many of these reunions have you been to?
We've been to all of the reunions in the United States except for the one in I can't think of the place, at a ski area.
Mm-hmm.
Sun Valley.
Oh, Sun Valley.
Yes.
Well, now, do you have any grandchildren?
Yes, I have.
And how old are your grandchildren?
We have a granddaughter who is 12, and one is 10, and another is 7, and then a grandson who is 3.
And
I wasn't married until I was 38.
Okay, so you're a little bit older. So what is it that you want their generation to know about, you know, what the men in your company did? What would you like them to remember about you, to know about you? Something that you think would be important that they would carry on?
Well, to be thankful that we're citizens of the United States and the freedoms that we have.
And is there anything you'd like to add that, you know, anything I didn't ask you, or something you'd like to, you know, something that comes to mind that you would like to talk about, one of your friends or one of your friends that didn't come back? Is there anything that if you know, somebody is looking at these interviews, is looking for someone, is there anything that you'd like to say?
I can't think of anything right now.
Okay, well, I think that you've given a great interview, and we appreciate it, giving us a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you very much.
Wish I could have done better, but